I'm Mr. MEP, and I'm the host today, and I organized this 2 days, 2.5 a day program for Mayor Péter Márki-Zay, who is our Prime Minister candidate on behalf of the United Opposition Front in Hungary. And I asked Sándor Zsiros to be our moderator today because I'm a socialist, but it's not a socialist event because we met with the big 4 groups in the European Parliament, and I think it is very important to show that the Prime Minister candidate is right not only from one group, but supported by 6 Hungarian opposition parties. So, Sándor, the floor is yours. You are the moderator, and thank you so much your help.
Thanks very much, István, for the invitation. So, a couple of housekeeping rules. Everything is on the record, so what is said here, you can quote it, of course. We will have more or less 1 hour here. So at the beginning, can you hear me now? Okay. So at the beginning, we'll give the floor to the candidate who will talk about his experience here in Brussels and about his agenda. Then I prepared a couple of general questions to him, and then in the second part we will give you the floor. We would like to have as many questions as possible, and we just agreed that at the end you will have again the possibility to do bilateral interviews if you're interested, so I would say the last 15 minutes should be reserved for that, if you agree. So the big surprise of the success of Mr. Márki-Zay came around 3 weeks ago when the opposition primaries finished. Little bit of background: these primaries were organized because, you know, the government changed basically the electoral law, and we will have now parliamentary elections in just 1 round. So the opposition's idea was to find the best candidates in each constituency and to run together. That was the aim of the process, and they added also that they should find a common candidate. This united opposition is made of 6 parties, and additionally there are also 2 movements in it. These parties are from leftist to liberal, green, and there is also Jobbik, which is a rightist party, a former far-right party. And the candidate, Mr. Péter Márki-Zay, is a mayor of Hódmezővásárhely. This is a city in southeastern Hungary with a population of 44,000 people. He already managed to beat government party Fidesz in his constituency, so he became the mayor of this city. And it was the biggest surprise in the primaries, I think, was that he was able also to mobilize young voters, hesitant voters, and build a strong base without having a party background. So in Hungary, many of us think that it can be a potential danger for the elections for Prime Minister Orbán. So without further ado, I will give you the floor. What brings you here to Brussels? What is your message, and how was your welcome by the commissioners and by the heads of group you met?
Thank you very much, and please welcome everybody. First of all, thank you for being here, and it was a great pleasure for me not only to meet you, the international press, but also to meet with the representatives of these 4 very important parties in the European Parliament, and also several commissioners. Our aim with this visit was to show not only Hungarian interests, you know, our views on Europe and on the role of Hungary inside the European Union, but also to explain a little bit our situation in Hungary, which is of course very familiar to many of you already. The most important thing is that although we share very different views, or we do not share these views, of course we have very different political views. I myself, I'm a conservative, I'm a Christian, I'm a father of 7 kids. I'm an independent mayor in a small town in rural Hungary, as you have heard. But we work together very closely with 6 very different parties. It's now a united opposition where we agree on, I would say, more than 80%, probably more than 90% of the different issues that are facing Hungary. We see the future of Hungary in a very similar way, at least for the near future. We are not sharing necessarily certain taxation priorities, but we all share 4 basic values. One is democracy, the second is the rule of law, third is the market economy, and the fourth is European integration. I believe that these 4 common values are so important for Hungarians that we are ready to unite our forces to liberate Hungary from corruption. Because what we are fighting is a one-party state built by Orbán. It's hate campaigns against different minorities, the LGBTQ community, the Roma community, but also Jews and different other minorities and certain persons, of course, mostly the left-wing opposition, Mr. Soros. So hate campaigns against pretty much anybody that can be vilified by Orbán's propaganda machine to unite as many voters against something in hatred as possible. And that's how Orbán is maintaining his very corrupt government. So we are now not only rebelling against dictatorship, against corruption, but also against hatred. We believe that love and peace are the way to go. You cannot defeat hatred only by love, not by hatred. So this is bringing us closer together. Also, interestingly, Hungary is one of the countries, if not the country with the highest support for the European Union. 80% of Hungarians in public opinion polls confess to be a huge believer and supporter of the unified Europe. I know that it is contrary to Mr. Orbán's interests and views, but at least we Hungarians, we really share, we really feel at home here in the European Union, and we don't want to leave the Union. And we are afraid, of course, that Orbán would eventually lead Hungary out of Europe. So this is a very basic question, and that explains my visit to Brussels. We also have, of course, certain questions that we needed to discuss with the leaders of the European Union. One is, of course, that I already mentioned our problems with the lack of democracy, with the lack of rule of law, and the lack of media freedom in Hungary. I'll give you a few examples, of course. Orbán changed the Hungarian constitution. Now we don't even have a so-called constitution, it's called a basic law. But even in this basic law stipulates that if somebody is monopolizing power, is on the way to reach exclusive power in Hungary, of course, it is against even the basic law of Orbán's party, Fidesz. This basic law was only voted for by approved by one single party, Fidesz. Same way the new electoral law was only approved by one single party, Fidesz. The Constitutional Court's headcount was doubled and filled up with party loyalists by Fidesz, and now exclusively maintains Fidesz's power and is not raising their voice when there are clear breaches of even their basic law in selecting responsibles for very important posts like the Public Prosecutor's Office. The head of Public Prosecutor's Office, Mr. Polt, was, of course, a very loyal man to Orbán. He's not chasing corruption even when it happens in the opposition-led communities, never mind if it happens inside Fidesz. We know very clear cases when even Olaf raised serious questions, I would say very well-funded allegations against Orbán's son-in-law, Mr. Tiborcs. That was a well-known case of public lighting project, LED public lighting project. We consider this to be a huge corruption scandal, but Mr. Polt didn't raise a question and didn't do anything. In lack of any investigation, they just dropped the case. We also asked the European Court of Justice decision to be executed and followed by Olaf and make all details of this huge corruption scandal public as soon as possible. It is important that they do not withhold any information before the end of the elections. Also, if we speak about democracy, Fidesz rewrote the constituencies, you know, the electoral district limits in Hungary or borders. So it's very difficult. We are very much aware that we have to have a huge majority, and we also have an uphill battle against the Fidesz system in this single party approved electoral system. It's not only the state propaganda, not only huge unlimited financial resources supporting Fidesz and very limited resources available for the opposition, but also you have to know that, for example, in my county, there are 4 electoral districts. If the support for Fidesz and opposition would be 50-50%, this would give 3 districts to Fidesz and only 1 district to the opposition, because that's how they rewrote the limits and redistributed the constituencies inside each county. So, and of course, this election will be decided mostly in the 106 districts. So it will be extremely difficult to defeat Orbán and their Fidesz in their own system, because they created this system to be unbeatable, Orbán to be unremovable, and everything is supporting them. If in previous elections we had any complaints against Fidesz at the electoral court, it has always been rejected. If Fidesz had any complaints against the opposition, it has always been approved. If, and that was also a specific case just a few kilometers away from us, if in a city Fidesz won the election by 1 single vote, they didn't even allow a recount. If Fidesz in Jászberény, for example, lost by 14 votes, they recounted, and eventually they had a new election, which they lost, fortunately. But anyway, it's a very unequal, it's a very unjust system. It's almost impossible to defeat Orbán, but now we have the highest chance of achieving this in a decade. In order to achieve this, of course, because it's a single-round electoral system, if we do not unite from the far right to the far left, all opposition forces, it's impossible to defeat Fidesz. We finally achieved to do so. It's a sufficient but not, it's a necessary but not a sufficient condition for defeating Orbán. We also need credible alternatives, a good program, and a very successful campaign, of course. I managed to do this in my community. Hódmezővásárhely used to be a Fidesz stronghold. What we managed to do is not decreasing the Fidesz votes, number of Fidesz votes. What we managed to do, we more than doubled the opposition votes. And yes, as my colleague, or our friend explained, this was achieved by convincing the undecided and even former Fidesz voters like myself. So the reason I explained to you that I have a big family, I'm a practicing Christian, I was a Christian way before Orbán. Orbán was still in the communist youth movement when I already attended church every Sunday during communist times. Orbán was mocking the visit of John Paul II to Hungary in '92. He was a harshly anti-clerical liberal. He also said that as long as he's going to be the president of Fidesz, Fidesz will always remain a liberal party. Well, after that he turned into a conservative, a pro-Europe and harshly anti-Putin conservative, which I supported. But how could I support him any longer when he turned into a harshly anti-EU, pro-Putin? And I wouldn't call him a conservative anymore. Conducting hate campaigns and maintaining the most corrupt system in Europe, even according to official statistics. Hungary has also turned into the 2nd poorest nation in the European Union. Hungary had very good chances of reaching or developing towards the European mainstream after 1990. Unfortunately, Hungary's last 30 years is not a success story. Hungary has also become not only the 2nd poorest nation in the European Union, but also the one with the highest percentage of poor people. According to statistics, 74% of Hungarians live under the European poverty threshold. 74%, and this is the highest number in Europe. So if you see where does it lead? An illiberal state, we can rightly call it authoritarian regime or sometimes call it a dictatorship. It's not only corrupt, but it also keeps people in poverty. Also denies the freedom of information, freedom of press. I just mentioned that, you know, this system is, and why do I call it a dictatorship? It's not, there's no rule of law. I can tell you I had more than 20 or about 20 legal cases brought against me by Fidesz loyals in the last 3 years, just because I was the mayor, an opposition mayor of a formerly Fidesz town. And some of the judgments by the judges are outrageous, simply. In one case, when Mr. Lazar, who used to be the second in command in Fidesz, you know, he brought this case against me at the Szeged court that I was, it was a defamation case, absolutely unfounded. His charge was not true. The judge accepted it. The judge excluded the press from an open court case. The judge didn't allow our witnesses to be heard at this hearing. And finally, the judge proved that Mr. Lazar was innocent by checking his records and stating that he had no prior convictions. Just consider this, if somebody doesn't have a prior conviction, it doesn't mean that he can kill someone or he cannot commit a crime. But for a judge in Hungary, it was a sufficient reason to make a judgment. So yes, the judiciary system is not independent at all. There is no freedom of the press either. Just consider that Orbán is using a spy software from Israel. It was called Pegasus. You remember this case because it was very internationally well known. Other victims included Mr. Macron, but also the Moroccan Queen. But Hungary was the only state who used it against their own people, against journalists, against politicians like Mayor Gyimesi, against people who hold media interest, entrepreneurs, and even Fidesz managers of certain areas. So Orbán's system, and just this week, or just in the last week, I would say, Mr. Kósa openly admitted that this software was acquired and used by our internal ministry, Ministry of Internal Affairs. So just imagine that this is Hungary, one member state in the European Union. Should the European Union allow this to happen? Because I don't think so. The problems, very clear problems in Europe, discussed widely, and I know Brexit also indicated some of these problems, are due to the fact that Europe is not strong enough. We Hungarians, we consider, and at least the large majority of Hungarians, the problems of Europe can be solved by more Europe, by a stronger Europe, and not less Europe, not a weaker Europe. We need, yes, border protection. Orbán is right in claiming that migration can be a danger, terrorism can be a danger for Europe, and Europeans, also Hungarians, we demand stronger border control. Border control must be a European priority and not let to be done by Orbán. Why I'm saying this? Because you also know that Gruevski was smuggled into Hungary by Orbán. Gruevski is an internationally wanted criminal who is harbored by Orbán. Orbán is a clear security risk to Europe, not only Hungary. When Orbán was selling citizenship bonds to 20,000 people, which was again a corruption case, as always in the case of Orbán and Fidesz, the state actually lost 50 million euro on bringing in these 20,000 migrants with the citizenship bond program. But friends of Mr. Rogán, Orbán's responsible minister for propaganda, friends of him benefited 500 million, made a profit of 500 million euro from selling citizenship bond. And since you know that it was a huge profit for them, Fidesz oligarchs, now you understand why they didn't check the background of these migrants. These migrants included Russian criminals, apprehended in Finland, by the way, and also included Islamist terrorists. Orbán doesn't care who he brings in to Hungary and Europe, I have to emphasize, because of Schengen. These people paid for these citizenship bonds not because they wanted to settle in Hungary, because they wanted to get in the Schengen Europe. So all these people, when they came in, you know, they expose a risk for Europe and not just Hungary. But Orbán didn't care because of the 500 million euro that they profited from this. State was making a loss, $50 million euro loss. So yes, Pegasus software, the visa program, Hungarian citizen or settlement visa program, it all indicates that Orbán is clearly a security risk and not only a risk to democracy, but also to the safety and security of European people. Corruption is, of course, not only a Hungarian internal issue. Orbán was getting huge European funds in order to make his friends and family richer. His son-in-law, who was responsible for the aforementioned case of corruption with the public lighting project, became the 30th richest Hungarian in 3 years. Orbán's childhood friend and schoolmate, Mr. Mészáros, who is a plumber, and I may not know if he's talented enough, but I know that he cannot possibly honestly make a fortune which is bigger than that of the Queen of England in less than 4 years. It is impossible. A plumber making more money in 4 years than the wealth of the Queen of England is a clear indication that we have a huge corruption issue. And I could go on and mention that, for example, Hungary is the only country in the European Union that used Sinopharm vaccine, the Chinese vaccine. Not only used it, but used it on 400,000 elderly citizens over 60 years of age. Hungary is the only country in the world that used Sinopharm on elderly people over 60, because even the Chinese didn't use it. They didn't even test it on the elderly, because they said it was not suitable for elderly people. So why did Mr. Szijjártó, Hungary's foreign minister, allowed this to happen? It's because his friend was making several hundreds of millions of euros probably on different businesses like this. Hungary has actually paid for a Sinopharm vaccine twice the price that Senegal was paying. Hungary also acquired needlessly, absolutely ridiculously high number of respirators. Hungary had never had the capacity to use more than 2,000 respirators, because we just don't have the personnel, the capacity in the hospitals. Hungary already had about 3,000 respirators to begin with, yet they purchased an additional 16,000 respirators, which are now stored in storages and not used, of course, because they couldn't be used, and sometimes given away as gifts to Mongolia, Ghana, and Rwanda, I believe. Why? It's because Slovenia purchased from the same Slovenian company the exact same make and model of respirators, interestingly, for about 30% lower price. I can give you the names, the numbers in HUF, in forint. Slovenia purchased these, each unit purchased for 12.7 million HUF. Hungary, Szijjártó purchased it for 17.2 million, each unit. So there's a 50% gap if you want. But it became a huge corruption scandal in Slovenia. So even the lower price was too high compared to the real value. So a Slovenian minister had to be replaced, and there was a huge government scandal. What happened in Hungary? Nothing. Our public prosecutor didn't even mention it. There was absolutely no investigation. So yes, corruption is the biggest issue, and corruption is the reason why the highest number of people died in Hungary in the COVID crisis in the European Union. Hungary is also leading international statistics on deaths, COVID deaths, for several months in the first half of this year. We had the highest number in the world. Out of 195 countries, Hungary had the highest number of deaths. And now you know why. Because of corruption. So yes, we have a huge issue, and we also need Europe's protection, because Europe cannot afford having a country inside Europe which has Pegasus software used against us, which doesn't allow freedom of the press. Just imagine that in Hungary, an opposition politician can only get, an entire party, can only get 5-minute airtime on our public television paid by our taxpayers' money in 4 years. 5 minutes in 4 years per party. I had only one chance in my last 4-year career to be live on public television in Hungary. Of course, there are smear campaigns against me, and my recognition has been risen to record high in the latest years, because I'm alleged to be the man of Gyurcsány. Gyurcsány is the former prime minister, of course, criticized by many in Hungary, probably a very much hated figure, and that's why Fidesz is portraying all of their enemies as being under the influence of Gyurcsány. And they just replaced, previously, it was very unexpected that I became, as a conservative, without any party support, became the joint opposition candidate. Fidesz didn't accept this to happen, so previously even them, the communication director of Fidesz expressed openly that I cannot win this primary election because I'm not the man of Gyurcsány. After I won, I became the man of Gyurcsány. And I'm now in billboard advertisements in thousands of surfaces in Hungary. And they started a smear campaign. They will attack me with anything, as they did with my predecessors. Anybody who could pose as a challenge to Orbán's rule became public enemy number one, subject and victim of smear campaigns. Even my wife was attacked. He was portrayed as a baby killer just because she was a midwife. There was, of course, no court case. It was just a defamation in the media. So yes, it's a very ugly system, and I don't, not only me, but Europe, we just cannot accept this in Europe. Thank you. Just one last case before we go to your questions. Actually two, sorry. One is businesses with China and Russia. So Orbán, we respect these powers, we respect these nations. Of course, with very great history and tradition, etc. But Hungary has not been dealing with these nations on an equal basis. Not investments, etc. were not serving Hungarian national interests. It was contrary to Hungarian national interests to build a railway line from Belgrade to Budapest using Chinese loan, mostly above market price or interest rates, serving no Hungarian interest, bypassing Hungarian population centers. It was only Chinese interest. Eventually, Hungarian taxpayers will have to repay this. Hungary ousted Orbán, ousted CU, which was the best, most respected university in Hungary, also attended by some of Fidesz's managers and politicians, and it didn't cost a penny to the Hungarian taxpayers. Now they invited Fudan, a Chinese communist university, and subsidized it with higher amount than the entire Hungarian university system. You cannot explain this rationally, other than possibly corruption. So yes, this was a huge problem, and we could go on and on with the nuclear power plant of Paks and the International Investment Bank invited to Hungary. But I already mentioned that Orbán is a security risk to Europe, a spy bank, basically a Russian spy bank. The other topic I needed to mention before I give the floor to your questions is the rule of law and democracy in Hungary. You have to understand what we need to do after ousting Orbán, if we manage to do that in April, is start everything from scratch. You cannot base a new democratic Hungary's rules on Orbán's current legal system. Orbán can make a law with his two-thirds majority in the parliament, with his lawyers in the constitutional court, with switching off all the checks and balances in the Hungarian legal system. He can make a law tomorrow and decide that the next elections will be 130 years from now. We cannot accept this. We also cannot accept all their decisions. He cemented in his lawyers to different positions like the public prosecutor's office, also made potential voter fraud possible by allowing just a year ago that everybody can take a picture of their own vote. People can be now blackmailed into making such proofs of their loyal vote to Fidesz in order to keep their jobs, etc. So now we cannot accept this at all. We have to start everything from scratch. We cannot accept. Nazi criminals were not prosecuted based on Nazi law. After the communist regime, you didn't accept all the communist rules that they made. We will not accept and cannot accept every appointments, every nominations, etc., and all the rules of Fidesz in order to restore democracy. So the European Union, European jurists, etc., cannot and should not protect the rule of law in Hungary because there's none. We will restore. We have to start it from scratch because there's no democracy, no freedom of the press, no rule of law in Hungary. We have to start everything from scratch. So we are now preparing a new constitution. Hopefully, after our electoral victory, we will have a referendum on it, and we will build a new democratic Hungary. Hopefully, our new constitution will last 2 centuries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the questions, I would like to clarify this. You would like to actually annul, invalidate the current constitution, the current basic law, with a simple majority,
No.
with help of the referendum, or what
No.
does it mean?
No, we need a new constitution, and I'm not talking about the current basic law in Hungary. Let's call it a constitution for simplicity. It has been, some parts we have absolutely no problem with. Many parts were the same as in the previous constitution. But anything that Fidesz did in the last 10 years to cement his power, to make his rule irreplaceable, to make Orban undefeatable, is invalid, even according to his own constitution. So we don't need even 51% to state this. The Fidesz-led Constitutional Court already should have declared all these rules unconstitutional. They just failed to do it, but now we are doing that. Again, it doesn't have anything to do with 51% or 67%. It's a fact that it is unconstitutional. And yet, of course, we will have to come up with a new constitution, yes, and approve it by a referendum.
Let me have a final question. What do you think? Should Europe connect the issue of values, the issue of rule of law with the payouts of European funds? Should they block recovery money or should they release it to Hungary?
They should block all payments to Orban's friends and family via corrupt practices. This is a basic rule, and it's not to punish Hungary. You don't punish Hungary if you defend Hungarians from their own corrupt rulers. It's to defend European taxpayers. European taxpayers should not never allow corrupt dictators or authoritarian leaders to get rich from European taxpayers' money with openly corrupt practices. So this is the most important.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Finbar, Birmingham, South China Morning Post. I wanted to ask you about the vaccine situation that you mentioned. If you win, will you stop the use of Sinopharm in Hungary? And do you have anything to say about plans to manufacture Sinopharm within Hungary? And just a quick follow-up, will you also revisit the Belgrade to Budapest railway? Will you try and renegotiate those loans, or will you renege on the loans? Thank you.
Yes, of course, everything must be revisited and reviewed, and all corrupt practices must be identified and hopefully prosecuted. So yes, Belgrade Railway or the vaccine procurement must be revisited and must be checked thoroughly by open and independent process by independent authorities. Yes, because of prosecution mainly. The question, everything else must be made on an independent and professional judgment, not on potential benefits for corrupt people. So yes, the question is the Sinopharm vaccine of highest quality? Because I also heard, I'm not sure, but maybe Sinopharm will be discontinued even in China. Not sure if it's true or not, but that's what I heard as a rumor. So anyway, that's one thing. So Sinopharm may not be the choice of vaccine even for the Chinese. And in that case, Hungary should not purchase them. Hungary should not produce them. Use of Sinopharm is much better than no vaccination at all. According to some statistics, it has a 78% efficiency. All other vaccines have higher than 90% efficiency. So maybe it was not a very wise choice by Orban. But again, in the lack of other vaccines, potentially that could have been a rational decision, except now that we know that they paid twice the price of, twice the market price. So in itself, it could have been a rational choice. I'm not judging Orban for using Sinopharm. Yes, I do, of course, but it's for the aforementioned reasons.
Gentleman in the third row, please.
I'm Frank Schweibert. I'm one of the founders of the German Greens. My first political experience was when I was 4 years, listening to the radio, these old radios, and I listened to what happened in autumn '56 in Hungary. Therefore, in my heart, this blood then were green and a German. I felt a lot Hungarian. And when I was here the first MEP, Otto von Habsburg was for me more Hungarian than Austrian. And I was involved in the fight on the Danube River. And my first resolution here was on the Danube River, which was passed because Otto von Habsburg said, he's a green, but nevertheless, it's wonderful. Now, I tell you all of this. Why? Because I suffered, as I half Hungarian in my feelings, of your bad reputation. We all know in politics it's very, very difficult to get up in reputation and very easy to go down. And when I say in discussions that I like Hungarian culture, Hungary here, I've always to add, but Orban not. Therefore, I think you have a double task. One task is in your country, and this is like Hercules in your country to work. And there you will fight against the old elite, But you will have a lot of people who are happy to support you. But here, it is mostly an indifference. Okay, Hungary is one of these countries, we don't say Central Europe, Eastern Europe. Yes, sure. And therefore, do you have a campaign? Do you have a specific possibility to influence public perception outside Hungary that you are a wonderful new example, because otherwise it will be indifference to what is happening in this small, lost country so much in the East?
Thank you very much. Well, just to make it sure, you know, we are campaigning to win the elections in Hungary. Hungarians will be voting, not anybody outside Hungary. Hungarians do live here in Brussels in large numbers, that we know. We also had a forum just the night before, 2 days ago, basically. So there are 200 Hungarians living in Brussels attended, and they will be voting. We know that. So yes, we have a campaign, but we have a campaign in order to win the elections in Hungary. But however, my presence here and your presence here is, for us, an excellent opportunity to influence public opinion, to tell you specific examples. Just to say that Orbán is corrupt and Orbán is illiberal, it doesn't help. You, the press, must quote very specific examples, just like I did, because then your voters will not consider him to be a hero anymore. Unfortunately, because Orbán was sometimes right on certain specific issues, many of your compatriots, Germans, French, Italians, consider Orbán to be a hero, or Polish people consider Orbán to be a hero. But I can tell you that those Polish who do not want to live under the rule of Orbán should not consider Orbán to be a hero at all. Those Le Pen, AfD, Salvini followers who want to have media freedom in their own countries should not consider Orbán to be a hero. Those who want to be protected from terrorism, from illegal migration, should not consider Orbán to be a hero. And that's your job. Your job is to convince even far-right voters in your respective countries that Orbán is not a hero. Orbán is a corrupt dictator and a traitor of European, Western European values, a traitor of Christianity. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you, James Cantor from eScream. We've seen American ultra-conservatives, you know, self-styled patriots inspired by Viktor Orban's ally, Donald Trump, storming the US Capitol on January the 6th. What chance of restoring the Hungarian constitution, and as you say, Hungarian democracy, without civil unrest and violence next year and in the years following? And if I may, a follow-up question to something you said earlier. What drew you to Fidesz in your earlier political incarnation? Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of your question?
The last part of my question was a second question. What drew you to the Fidesz party in your earlier political incarnation? Thank you.
I didn't understand the use of incarnation in that regard, but okay. No, I will first answer your second question, sorry. You have to understand that I have not changed. I have not changed in 40 years. I have been a practicing Christian, a devout Catholic, since my childhood. Again, attended church in communist times every Sunday. I was a very loyal to Hungarian national traditions. You know, I consider them an important asset and something that we have to maintain, keep, and pass on to future generations. Culture, European culture, Christian culture, yes, it is all important for us. So I am a conservative. That's why I consider myself a conservative, mostly because I'm very religious. I'm also the head of the parish council in my constituency. But again, I was part of it in several other communities where I lived. Orbán has changed, not me. So it was not me. You are asking why was I supporting Fidesz then and why am I not supporting Fidesz now? I also didn't support Orbán when he was part of the Communist Youth Movement, when he was the international VP for the Liberal International. I also don't support him when he is serving Putin's interest and betraying Hungarian and European interest. It's that simple. When he was, his policy, as a conservative, I believe that we should not give just financial benefits for the unemployed. We should give them jobs, because jobs also give people dignity. That's why I'm right-wing and not left-wing. I could go on and on. I believe in lower taxation, for example, and many other things, yes. We also have social sensitivity, but we need to help people, again, with dignity. I very much support the Roma community. As a mayor, as I mentioned, I have the only integration program in Hungary that is financed by our own resources, not by European funding, for example. So equal rights for same-sex couples, for example, I support because I believe in a secular state. I'm a conservative, I'm a Catholic. I'm not only against abortion, I'm also against divorce. But I would never consider making divorce illegal. It's my own conviction. It has nothing to do with the secular state. So I didn't change, Fidesz did several times. And when they do something right, I'm the only opposition politician probably in Hungary who praises them for this. I will always criticize the opposition as well when I don't agree with them. That's why I'm independent. So going to your several questions. First, the civil unrest issue. Yes, many people in Hungary ask the question, okay, but what happens if you disregard Fidesz's legal system? There will be civil unrest, and Fidesz, it will not be civil, we know that it will be organized by Fidesz. Okay, and I just have another question for this. Then should we not try to throw out this government? Should we not overthrow Orban's regime just because we are fearful of a civil unrest? A civil unrest must be handled by the police, must be handled by the authorities. And I just don't see that huge masses in Hungary will march on the streets for the rights of criminals. If people will be aware all the crimes that Fidesz has conducted, like in my city, Hódmezővásárhely, they are. And when Mr. Lázár, it's like I said, he was second in command in Hungary. He was a minister in Orbán's government, and he's still our MP in our district. Hopefully we can defeat him in April. You know, he also got one of the richest persons in Hungary, just because, and he never had any other job than government jobs, to be an MP, basically. And he now has a palace outside of Hódmezővásárhely, and they forgot to steal the road that leads to this palace inside the fences. So he has a huge estate, a palace, and the road. As it turned out, the road still belongs to our municipality, to my city. So, of course, we told that he has to give it back. He wanted to buy it. I said, no, it's strategically important for our city, but he can still rent it, and he has to pay for it. And you know what? Yes, there was a civil unrest, and some people protested that we demand money for using that road owned by the municipality. You know how many they were? One single Fidesz representative in our city council. So I don't see that great masses will march on the street to protect criminals. And for your final question is regarding Tucker Carlson, I believe. So Tucker Carlson visited Hungary probably for a decent sum of money. But it's again rumors, of course. He thinks he did it for free. But Tucker Carlson, who is a typical representative of the American far right, just to mention, yes, I am a conservative here. I'm not a conservative, considered to be a conservative in the United States, because I'm very much against death penalty. And I wouldn't change abortion law, for example. But if Tucker Carlson considers Orban to be a hero, why didn't he mention in his show that Orban did nothing to stop abortion in Hungary? Why did he not mention that Orban allowed the International Investment Bank, a Russian spy bank, to settle in Budapest with diplomatic immunities? Why did he not mention that Huawei technology was allowed to be used in Hungary, very much criticized by the United States? Why did Tucker Carlson not mention that when Russian arms dealers, criminals, were apprehended in Hungary following US security services instructions, they were not extradited to the US, contrary to the US demands, they were extradited to Russia. They were allowed to go home for free. Tucker Carlson forgot to mention that Orban is a betrayer of the NATO alliance. Orban is a betrayer of a traitor of Europe. Tucker Carlson would be not proud of Orban's decisions if all the Americans would know about it. Of course, it's the American press's job to make it very apparent in the US. Thank you.
Jennifer, yes.
Jennifer Rankin from The Guardian. I wanted to return to the Constitution, which I know came up in the discussion immediately after your presentation, but I wanted to understand, to be sure, what would happen if the opposition, the 6 parties that you're leading, do not win a 2/3 majority. I didn't quite understand what you meant. Do you mean you could change the Constitution without a 2/3 majority? And are you confident that you have the support of all those parties, including the Jobbik party, for the rule of law and all the democratic and freedom of the press changes that you want? And a second question, if I may, you said that Viktor Orban was sometimes right on certain specific issues. Which issues was he right on?
Thank you. So I think, for example, the border fence, which was Orban's project, sometimes criticized by certain people, but very much approved by the majority of Hungarians. And we also, as the joint opposition, we declared that we will keep the border fence. We will not remove the fence. It has been built, you know, it serves a purpose. So, of course, I think it's a legitimate tool of controlling illegal migration. So he was probably right on defending European borders, yes. He was not right on many other issues on migration, as I mentioned. And sorry, going back to the previous gentleman's question, I forgot to mention we also need to bring to Tucker Carlson's attention on the corrupt practices. I'm not sure too many Americans would adore Orban Viktor for being so corrupt that his son-in-law became so rich so soon, his childhood friend became so rich so soon, and I could go on and on and on. Going back to your question, so yes, Orban was also right on many things, making legislation a little slimmer. Now we only have 199 seats in the parliament. Previously we had 386. Of course, Orban did it in order to redraw the district limits and also to rewrite the entire electoral system, which was, of course, contrary to democracy. But in itself, having less MPs in Hungary, I supported. Having less city council members than before, I supported. And to give you a very obvious change, previous governments didn't want to confront the smokers, I believe. Orban's government made it illegal to smoke inside closed spaces. So when I attend a sweet shop, a konditorei, with my kids, not anymore because now are almost grown up, but at the time, you know, we always smelled bad after attending. Again, it was a sweet shop for kids, for example, but it still smelled bad because of the people who smoked inside. Not anymore. So again, it must be a European initiative, I guess, you know, to protect the health of non-smokers, but still, Orban was brave enough to change legislation on this. And I could go on and on. Yes, of course. You know, there are specific details that he's right, and I will always admit and support it. And there are other issues which are outrageous, and I will always criticize them. Jobbik, I believe Jobbik has changed a lot, and we appreciate this change, and we encourage further change in the Hungarian culture. Racism, intolerance towards minorities based on the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, their origin is unacceptable. We are very much building a Hungary that is based on love and tolerance and acceptance towards people, again, with different color, skin, background, etc., Roma community, homosexuals, LGBT community. And Jobbik is part of this alliance, and they go with us in this project, which we appreciate. Again, they appreciate democracy and many other values that we also share, and we have minor disagreements still. On the constitution, yes, it's very unlikely, again, mathematically speaking, that either Fidesz will have a 2/3 majority after April. We consider that, I just read an analysis from the City of London. It considers that chance to be dropped from 15 to 5% after my election as the joint candidate for the opposition. They also consider that our chance to win a simple majority went up from 20 to 40% with my election, with a higher appeal to undecided voters and former Fidesz voters, of course. But there's hardly any chance, I wouldn't say that, but a relatively slim chance so far. We are working very hard on increasing that chance, that we will get a two-thirds majority in Orbán's system. We also know that Orbán is probably planning to do further changes in the electoral rules. And we still do not accept illegal and unconstitutional practices cemented in Orbán's rule. It's unacceptable. We don't need a two-thirds majority to state that many of the things that he did was unconstitutional to begin with. And yes, we will start everything from scratch because we will have to do this. We will accept every rule that was not unconstitutional to be valid, but we have to change. We have to have a new constitution that is a rule of law democratic constitution. And yes, we believe that first of all, we will declare it upfront. We will be very apparent on this issue. During the election, all of the people who vote for us will know exactly what our suggestion for the constitution will be. And yes, as soon as possible, we suggest to have a referendum on this new constitution.
Do we have time for one last question, and then maybe you will be able to answer bilaterally if you have the time?
I'm sure your question's better than mine.
Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
So you said that in your elections you didn't manage to really convert any Fidesz voters. You got some new voters on board. I mean, is that going to work at a national level? And I mean, you mentioned all the sort of forms of corruption. I think most people are very aware of the high level of corruption, and it's a sort of, I mean, seems to be outside Hungary. But can you? I'm assuming that people, even if Orbán has a stranglehold on the media, I'm sure people must be aware of the corruption. And so, why aren't they more appalled? I mean, why aren't you winning more people over from Fidesz? Thank you.
Yes, again, first, corruption. Yes, people are aware. Of course, during all my campaigns, and in the last 4 years, I pretty much campaigned all my time. I talk to people, talk to Fidesz loyal people as well. They all are aware. Fidesz politicians, they admit privately that Fidesz is extremely corrupt. No secret about it. Even Fidesz voters admit that Fidesz is corrupt. But their excuse to this is that everybody is corrupt. Even the opposition. Well, you would do the same if you had the power. That's their answer to this. My answer is that no, we don't. And we are not going to. Yes, some people in the opposition were corrupt. Some people are still corrupt in the opposition. Interestingly, Fidesz is not chasing them, not prosecuting them. I'm pretty sure that they are either doing it together or Fidesz is using it for blackmail, gaining influence inside the opposition. Yet, we declared openly, and that's the big difference. Do we have a clear, safe alternative to corruption? So those people who refuse corruption, can we promise them that we are not going to be corrupt? And this is a question to all politicians in the world. Well, our answer is, first of all, that we are going to reinstate or create an anti-corruption agency. By the way, Romania did it very successfully. We already have a clear recipe for this. We just have to copy it. So we need an anti-corruption agency. We also joined the European Public Prosecutor's Office. Orbán considers this to be a limitation on Hungary's sovereignty. As always, we have to emphasize that this is not a limitation on Hungary's sovereignty, it's a limitation on criminals' sovereignty. It is a limitation on Orbán's sovereignty, not on Hungarians and not on Hungary's sovereignty. It's very important. So yes, it's a proof. A criminal would not want to join the European Public Prosecutor's Office. So it's a very clear message to Hungarian voters that now there will be change, that now we will stop corruption and not going to steal instead of Fidesz. And yes, previous governments collaborated with Fidesz. We know many cases where corruption was a joint corruption between the former government and the current government, politicians, certain politicians. We still consider that all parties have very decent politicians. Even Fidesz politicians, many of them are totally decent and clean. We just don't tolerate, I just don't tolerate corruption. And we also appointed for the future position, or we have already a nominee, that's Hódmezővásárhely, the best known corruption fighter in Hungary, who is so critical of corruption that he fights corruption before and after 2010. Left and right, opposition government, he fights corruption everywhere where he sees some corruption. I usually jokingly say that even when there is no corruption, he will still fight it. So he's a very dedicated man, just like Kodruca Kövesi, the head of the European Public Prosecutor's Office. And we need such dedicated people, such saint people, to fight corruption. And yes, to convert Fidesz voters, we still managed to convert many of them. The number didn't drop in my city. You know, formerly the opposition jointly had 6,000 opposition voters, and Fidesz had 10,000, 9 to 10,000 voters. They still have the same 9 to 10,000 in my city, but we have now 13,000, more than doubled the opposition votes. We also had the highest turnout in Hungary in the municipal elections, 67%. If we had only the average turnout, which was 48%, I would not be mayor today. Also, we had a high turnout at the second round of and both rounds actually of the primary elections. I would not be the joint candidate if 220,000 additional voters, first-time voters, didn't turn out for the second round. Many of them young people. So the only reason, if there is a credible alternative, a clean, dedicated, somebody who people can trust, people will turn out in huge numbers, and previously undecided people, some Fidesz voters, they will trust us.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this press briefing. This concludes